Hello everyone, and welcome to this video which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we are going to take a look at a thrilling draw between Komodo Dragon and Stockfish, TCEC Season 22 SuperFinal, Game 19. There have been many fine wins in the SuperFinal, and that tends to mean that the draws get a little overlooked. When I saw this game though, I was really impressed by Stockfish's strategy in this slow French type of position, and I think it's a wonderful exposition of how to play these positions. Indeed, I think that human players could learn an awful lot from it. This structure was reached from an Owen's defence. That's e4, b6, d4, bishop d7, bishop d3, e6, knight f3, c5, c3, knight f6, queen e2, and here black decides to do something about the strong white centre by playing the move d5, staking a claim to the centre. And after e5, knight f d7, bishop f4, we have our slow French structure. What is a slow French structure? Well, in a slow French, black doesn't go for the normal rapid French counterplay against white centre with knight c6, queen b6, or f7 to f6 against the pawn on e5. Black instead develops behind its solid central pawn structure. And there are a number of ways that black can play like this. One idea is to exchange off the light squared bishops with a move like bishop a6. What's the idea? That is a long-term thing. The idea is that you're exchanging off your bad bishop that's blocked in by the pawns on d5 and e6 for white's good bishop, which isn't blocked in by the pawns on c3, d4 and e5. Obviously with a white queen on e2 you can't do it immediately, so you have to spend a bit more time either to play a5 and bishop a6 or to play queen c8 and bishop a6. However, although this exchange is very nice in the long run, it does give some problems in the short term and medium term. In particular, black is spending a lot of time, which gives white a lot of time to start building up its own expansion on the king side, and also exchanging off the light squared bishops. It's good in one way positionally, but it also weakens the support of the d5 and e6 pawns, black's own light squares. And this can make the black position particularly vulnerable to the c4 break and the f4 to f5 break. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how that works. To show you how dangerous the c4 break can be, I will take you to this game, which is Douglas Bryson against Tony Miles, Moscow Olympiad 1994. It's actually the last time that Tony Miles, a long-time aficionado of the Owen's defence, played this line. This must have been a suitably horrific experience for him. So Tony had played a5, and here he played bishop a6. But after bishop b5 check, takes, knight d7, he got hit with c4. And well, things took a steady turn for the worst as his light squares got completely blasted open by white. And indeed, Tony only saved the draw by offering one in a much worse position a few moves later. To show you the power of another break and also the weakness and the fragility of black's central light squares after the exchange of bishops, I'm going to take you back to the position after bishop f4 in our game and show you a game between Stockfish and Berserk, which was quite stunning in actual fact. So queen c8 played a4, bishop a6 and bishop b5, and this is a standard reaction in these type of structures when black plays bishop a6. After you play the move bishop takes b5, a takes b5, it takes black quite a lot of time to rid itself of this pawn and therefore get its queenside developed. And this of course gives white even more time to build up a kingside initiative. We're seeing that, as always, the kingside push is being started by the move h4, the low-cost, easy, neural net method of starting any operation on the wing. So a6, castles, c4, black threatening a takes b5 now, so white takes on a6, knight bd2, b5, h5, so we're looking to go h6 here and really weaken up these dark squares. So black responds with h6, And now knight h4. b4 played, takes, queen g4. And what you see in this position is that black has, well, a lot of difficulties getting its kingside pieces developed. You know, this bishop is really pinned down to the defense of the g7 pawn. You could play a move like rook g8, but first of all, you might get hit by bishop h6, exploiting the pin. And secondly, after rook g8, you can't castle kingside anymore. So knight c6 was played, bishop e3. One of these ideas is just to free the f-pawn to advance, and you can see how weak the e6 pawn will be. Black played queen a5, hoping to put some pressure against c3 and dissuade white from carrying on its attack with f4. But now some stunning play starts. What you'd expect from Stockfish. Knight g6, in it comes. If fg, then queen e6 check is really, really dangerous. So black plays rook g8, which is rather unfortunate because it means that black can't castle kingside anymore and it can't get its king to safety quickly. Knight f4, we're again looking for a sack on e6. Knight d8, knight e2. Amazing play here. You know, in just a few moves you've activated the knight and then brought it back to e2. But, well, it's doing much more on e2 from that point of view than it was on h4. And what have we still got? We have still got the idea of f4 to f5. And, you know, f5 is hitting those weakened central light squares. And if one of them goes, there's no protection. You know, without black's light squared bishop, there's no protection of the center anymore. So g5, f5, knight d8, knight df1 played, knight b6. And then here, white just starts, doesn't matter giving away pawns, just to get the pieces active. And rook b1, queen a3, queen c2, and now a lovely little move. Knight e4 was played, aiming for knight f6 check, and after d takes c4, queen c4, we're hitting the knight on c8 and the bishop on b4. So white regained the piece with just fantastic play for the pawn, and Stockfish converted this some moves later. But a really, you know, great demonstration of the difficulties that that black can have with this typical bishop exchange. It might be good, you know, in the future, but you've got the whole middle game to survive, and that can be pretty tricky. So in modern engine play, this plan of exchanging off the light square bishops is not very common. Now, in the good old 1980s and 1990s, where engines were real engines and didn't know what was happening, engines would play the move c4 very quickly, close the centre, then they would castle kingside, and then you would just beat them with a very slow and deliberate attack, and they would just be helpless to defend. Those were the days. Nowadays, of course, engines are much more subtle, and funnily enough, what you still see is that engines are playing c4, but then what they're trying to do is to expand on the queen side rapidly and get some gains as quickly as possible before white is really organised. And then afterwards, they're not committing the king to the king side, the engines are just waiting, and they're waiting to see, do I go king side, or do I maybe need to move my king to the other side? And yeah, you know, this sort of very subtle waiting strategy is well, really executed beautifully nowadays by engines. And of course, yeah, the one that'll do it really well is Stockfish, and we're going to see how that works out in this game. I was really impressed with it. So knight c6 played, h4, that's what we do, starting a wing attack, and now Stockfish comes in with c4, bishop c2 and b5. And then after king f1, Stockfish went b4 straight away, which can be a little bit surprising. The point is, black doesn't mind its queenside structure being broken. The important thing is to generate piece play, and for that end you don't need to play a move like a5 to make sure that you get a nice smooth pawn structure if ever white were to take on b4. No, what you want is piece activity, and you want to be going in there as quickly as possible. So b4 played straight away. Now, a slightly odd move played, or odd-looking move, and that was queen d1. Now, why was this move played? The simple point is that, I mean, rook h3 is quite obvious for white. It's the standard way that you do things in these French positions. The rook's coming around to g3 to attack the pawn on g7, pin down the bishop on f8. Well, then black plays queen a5. And there's one huge threat in this position, which you might be able to spot, and that's to play the move b4 to b3, because the pawn on a2 is pinned. So, for example, if I go king g1, I go b3, bishop d1, and can you spot it now? That's right, queen takes a2, and after rook a2, ba, well, black's got a rook in the pocket, and you're not going to be able to stop the pawn from queening. So you have to sort of do something about that. Now, rook h3, queen a5, bishop d1. That was one of the major alternatives of my engines, but, you know, it also looks a bit odd. So queen d1 is not so stupid. The idea is that when black plays queen a5, threatening b3 again, and also stopping this knight from developing by threatening b takes c3, then Komodo's idea was to go c takes b4. Now, black has a number of possibilities here. Knight takes b4 is what Stockfish played, and it's really the most consistent. You're going to try and get a gain, try and just exchange off the light square bishop, get the two bishops. There is also the move queen takes b4, but then you sort of see the point of queen d1. White can go knight c3, queen b2, and bishop d2. And, well, the queen on d1 is protecting c2 and a1. White is also now threatening to go rook b1, and well, with the knight on c3 you've also got ideas like knight b5. There was a stunning game again, which I'll show you, between Stockfish and Berserk, and Stockfish was playing these structures beautifully as white, I have to say. It's you know, it was really seeing so many sacrificial possibilities against this this pawn centre. It was incredible. This was a really nice game too. Rook b1, queen a3, king g1, taking your time, h5, h6, rook h3. Again, you know, white not rushing too much, just pretty sure basically that, well, with an open b file, that black's king is not going to be completely safe on the king side, and well, it's going to be very difficult to get kingside if the g7 pawn is going to come under attack from rook g3. So queen e7, knight h4, queen c7, queen bishop e1, bishop b4, a4, just giving ourselves a little knight b5, queen e7, and now the fireworks start, f4. So knight takes d4 played by Berserk, with the obvious tactical trick, queen takes d4, bishop c5. So white starts some incredible stuff here. Knight g6, in we go. Takes, and bishop takes g6 check, getting the bishop free from the attentions of the knight. And after king d7 we get this tempo move, bishop h4, attacking the queen on e7. Only move queen f8 to keep on defending the bishop on b4. And then we go rook b4, queen takes b4, queen takes d4, and sacrifice the exchange there, but we're just simply threatening to break through with f5. And well, black played knight a4, but after knight a4, queen a4, queen c5, queen c6, queen e7, and f5, the attack was well and truly launched. I mean, still, it was unbelievably complicated. But yeah, of course, Stockfish prevailed. I'm not sure about human chances, what this would have been. But yeah, for Stockfish, all the tactics were, of course, no problem. So after c takes b4, Stockfish took with the knight on b4. The idea being to take the bishop on c2. So king g1, knight c2, queen c2. And from this position onwards, Stockfish does a really nice regrouping to get its pieces ready for pretty much any eventuality. Well, if you spot it, then you're doing pretty well, because here Stockfish played the move knight b8. On d7, the knight was not doing much. I mean, it's just pointing at squares that are attacked. This knight is aiming for c6, and then we've got two possibilities. We've got the idea of coming into b4 and d3. A little bit risky maybe, but that is a possibility. The other idea is to keep the knight able to come across to f5, and that'll be really nice when white tries to put the rook on g3. We'll just harass it with knight to f5. So yeah, it's a lovely move that's got both defensive and attacking possibilities. So bishop d2 was played, queen a6. Just to give you a little example of how it can all go wrong, this is what white's fighting against basically. It's another Stockfish Berserk game. So Berserk played queen b6. I mean, I'm not quite sure about queen a6, queen b6, whether one's particularly worse than the other, but certainly in this case what happens is that Stockfish just takes the chance to open up the b file, and the queen is on this line. So queen a7 played, h5, takes, knight b4, queen d1, bishop a6 to cover b5 against invasion, and now h6. And yeah, this is really terrible. You can't allow this with black, really. It's after g6, we've got bishop g5, bishop e7 takes, and now, yeah, I mean, this really looks to me like an AlphaZero Stockfish 8 game. One of those old classics in which AlphaZero shoves the h pawn up to h6 and then spends the rest of the game rubbing its hands about all the dark squares that it can invade. And here knight h2 played, bishop c4, rook b2. And what we're doing, we are coming into f6, and well, the king on h8 is trapped away, and black's problem really is that now that any invasion by white along the open files is going to be extremely painful, which really restricts the amount of activity that black can do. And well, I'll just show you the final position of this game. I mean, gradually pieces got exchanged, and black's activity got less and less, and then we ended the game in this way, with the king still trapped in the corner, and knight f7 checkmate. So yeah, I mean, this b3 break on the queen side, extremely dangerous, and black's really got to watch out for it. So this move, queen a6, keeps the queen off the b file, and probably gives black a better way of fighting against it. So it's time for development now for both sides. So knight c3, knight c6, rook h3, rook b8, knight e2, queen b6. Just lining up the rook and the queen now against the pawn on b2, pawn on d4, and Komodo goes bishop c3, which turns the bishop into a big pawn, but does defend d4 and b2. And now bishop a6. And basically now black is in the waiting mode. So black's not going to make any attempt to move its king from e8. And also basically that means that it's not really going to make any effort to move the bishop from f8 either. Just going to wait to see white's next actions. It might be able at some stage to play bishop e7 and castles, as a Berserk surprised me with in one game, or it might be that the king has to head over to the queen side away from all that danger. Yeah, basically black is just waiting. So I mean, this is not a great way of playing for a win for black, because well, if white doesn't do anything, then you're not going to be able to do very much. But I think it is definitely the best way of playing these very difficult positions for black. So h5, and now obviously a very important move. Stop h6, stop white from getting any more control of the dark squares, and also stop a knight from coming into g5 as well. That means that f7 isn't as easy to attack, which does make it easier to get a king across the queen side. Rook g3, and now knight e7, just looking for knight f5. So knight h4 played by Komodo, and bishop c8 played. So this bishop is being rerouted just to give some support to e6, and also to give some support against f4 to f5 as well. Queen d2, knight c6 played. Yeah, now a rather surprising moment. Komodo played the move knight f3, which yeah, it's possible, but I mean, f4 is really natural. Just you've got a knight on h4, so why not try and play f4 to f5? So queen d8, was a very sensible idea, hitting the knight, forcing it back and slowing down f5. I'll show you one defence that Stockfish played in the game, and frankly I just don't understand it. This should not be possible, but somehow it works out. But rook b7, rook f1, bishop e7 played, knight f3, king f8, just moving the king into the danger like this. So a3, bishop d8, knight h2, knight e7, knight g4, knight f5, rook h3, and now, you know, just against every single principle you can think of, f6. So, you know, black's like put his king on the king side and is now helping white by opening up the center. So knight g3 happens, takes, and now another just absolutely amazing idea from Stockfish, closing the center and then playing this move g5. So the idea is that after hg you go h5, and yeah, I mean actually this pawn is doomed in the long term, and yeah, because you're just going to go h4 to drive away the rook, and then you're going to get some g-file counterplay. You know, it's I sometimes get a little bit irritated when people say, "Oh, you know, a human could never see that," you know, because I think, you know, that you know, there are many moves that engines plays that humans couldn't see, but you know, there are also quite a few that humans do. You know, I mean, the best chess players are, you know, are really strong. But this is definitely an idea where, you know, if a human played it, you'd want to know where he's going to the toilet, to be honest. This is really something that's you know, absolutely incredible. So rook g8, g4 takes, rook h2, g3, rook h3, rook h8, queen g2, king g7, and funnily enough, I think at this very moment when white played f5, the engines agreed to a draw because it was so obvious. Yeah, still a crazy position, but yeah, amazing defense. You know, just shows you what's possible. But yeah, I really do find it hard to, you know, to understand the logic of what Stockfish was doing in that game. Queen d8, very natural. Knight f3, bishop d7, rook f1, rook b7, always a useful move. You'll see it very often in the game, just defending laterally. If the f-file gets opened, it's good to have some protection of f7. And now this move, and you know, we're following a game Stockfish against Berserk here, and this is a great strategical move. We're coming around c2 to e3 in order to play f5, and from e3 the knight also attacks d5, so e takes f5 would allow knight takes d5. So queen h4, just to try and distract a little bit, nabbing a pawn, and then in we go with our knights. Queen g5, knight e3, so we're hitting d5 with two pieces. Bishop e6, queen e2, knight b4, and it's sort of vaguely holding together, you know, for the moment. But now Stockfish comes in with an exchange sacrifice, and I mean, this was what was so powerful about Stockfish's play throughout this series of games against Berserk. The number of sacrifices, either piece sacrifices against the center or exchange sacrifices like this, you know, absolutely incredible. And well, you know, just the power of what happens. The king gets driven out. Knight e3. We're hitting all sorts of things here. G4, queen g4 to distract. Bishop a3, and then in we come again. Queen f3. We're going to go knight f6 takes d5. That's coming in next move. And gradually the black position starts collapsing. Still, you know, enormously complicated for a human player, but of course, you know, Stockfish was already at some stratospheric evaluation level already. So yeah, I mean, f4 was very natural, and I think this was pretty much what you know, Stockfish was doing in my engine matches. But knight f3 was played, and now a3, and you know, this is a controversial move, really. On the one hand, it's quite interesting. I mean, it stops something coming into b4. It also gives, you know, white the possibility of playing bishop b4, maybe exchanging off the dark squared bishops and thus weakening g7. The one thing, though, is that it completely gives up the possibility of breaking with b3 on the queen side. And this basically means that black's king suddenly has really got a, you know, a clear spot to aim for. Because the queen side will be, you know, a lot safer than the king side, because on the king side we can organize some f4 to f5 and g5 breaks. With on the queen side, nothing's happening, and you see really, you know, sort of Stockfish snapping over and starting to make sure that the king is safe. So knight f5 just to knock the rook away. Bishop d7. Yeah, g4 would have been my natural idea, followed by knight h4 and then going f4, f5. Yeah, this was funnily enough where Berserk completely shocked me by playing castles, and then after rook g3, f6 as black, and it also withstood Stockfish, you know, without any hint of difficulty. Again, you know, sometimes you don't quite understand, you know, how can this be possible? It certainly shouldn't be possible. But Komodo played knight h2, and you know all these moves are good really. You know it's the same basic build-up. But rook b7, knight f1, and now a really good move. Stockfish is clearly thinking about moving the king to the queen side. We've got to be a little bit careful about it because king d8 allows bishop a5, which would be deeply embarrassing to demonstrate your strategical understanding with king d8 and then just lose your queen. So Stockfish plays bishop a4, and this has got two purposes. The king can come round now to d7 to c8, and of course we're clamping down on the b3 break, and we're also stopping any potential a4 to a5 to even a6, you know, just opening up the queen side a bit more. So this move bishop a4 really important, and it's only possible because of this controversial move a3. So rook e1, rook g8, not quite sure about that one. King h2, queen d8. At times, in actual fact, it looks like Stockfish was wondering whether it could play a move like g6 or g5. Again, you know, I'm less keen on those sort of moves. I mean, in general, you try not to move the pawns on the wing when where you're weakest. Because that just, you know, creates holes. You know, really you want white to be reaching forward as far as possible to create openings and not give it to for white on the plate. But you know, obviously Stockfish has got some pretty good ideas sometimes with defending, so can't rule it out completely. But in the game, Stockfish doesn't do that. Yeah, it's just one case here where Stockfish played g5, which looks really way out there. But at the TCEC, Stockfish played king d7, so the king is moving away. Waited for ages, haven't moved the bishop on f8, and now Stockfish has decided that the king is going onto the queen side. So g4, knight e7, knight e3, knight c6, rook f1. You know, Komodo doing the big build-up here just to get an f4 to f5, and bishop e7. f5 and bishop g5, and this is a nice echo to bishop a4. Basically, you know, as soon as you create some holes, you know, by advancing your pawns, the bishops seem to nestle themselves into the structure. Now, you know, what you're going to see doesn't look so difficult for Stockfish. You might, you know, conceivably say, you know, well, you know, this position wasn't really a problem, was it? But well, let's go back to our Stockfish Berserk games and we'll see what happened when Berserk was black. We had queen c8, for example, and now rook hf3, king c7, knight f4, king b6, and whack, in we come with a piece sacrifice, just destroying the center. And after king a6, we've got knight b4, and this is now really unpleasant because, well, first of all, you know, removing the knight on c6, we're threatening d5, we're threatening d6, we're threatening e6, f6, whatever. But we've also opened the a file as well, so this looked like a perfect place for the king to flee, but now there's a big pin on the bishop on a4. So bishop g5, queen f2, king b5, rook a1, rook b6, and now this lovely move b3. When bishop takes b3 allows rook a5 check and rook c5, and after b3, c takes b3, we've got queen f1 check, queen c4, rook a4, and after rook c6 we've got rook a5 check, king b6, d5, queen f1, bishop d4 check, king c7, rook f1, and you know, the position's still manically complicated, but you know, Stockfish was well on top and put this away, you know, quite beautifully. But again, you know, it's just to sort of show that don't be fooled by you know, how smooth Stockfish's defense seems to be. This is a really dangerous position. So bishop g5 played. I like this a lot. Knight f4, queen e8. So we're just defending the pawn. We're not doing anything crazy. The whole idea is to try and absorb the counterplay here. So queen f2, king b8, knight eg2, a5. Yeah, in the game Stockfish Berserk played e takes f5, which just looks wrong, really. You know, just causing all these weaknesses, opening lines. Stockfish keeps it tight at the back. Knight h3, bishop d8, takes. Now, I think at this stage that TCEC, Leela's top fan, Mr. Beads, is getting really, really excited here, because this may remind you of a game from season 17, the last Sufi that Leela won. And it was game 12, I believe, and it was a funny game in which Leela's evaluation was something like +5, but it seemed to be making no progress against Stockfish Classical until Stockfish Classical just, well, basically committed suicide, played some b4 move, and Leela ended up winning. And again, it's something very, very similar to what we have. And the key point about it was that it was just amazingly hard to make something of your invasion chances on the f-file. You know, you had control of the f-file, the black pieces were completely passive, and still it wasn't easy at all to win. Now, modern engines just win this just absolutely easily. But, you know, I mean, even season 17, Leela was, you know, really strong, and Stockfish Classical as well. So, but it just goes to show, you know, how interestingly and surprisingly tough this defense is. And if you compare it to this position, you'll see that black actually has a lot of advantages compared to that. The first thing is that black's actually got some proper counterplay. So the queenside isn't blocked with a a4, b5, c4 pawn chain. We've got this rook on b2, and actually this rook's doing a great job. I mean, it's covering the 7th rank entry points and also attacking b2. What we've also got, and in this season 17 game, White's main plan was just to exchange off the dark squared bishops, and then afterwards it was able to invade much more effectively on the king side. But this bishop on c3 is really just a big pawn. I mean, it's tied down to b2, it's tied down to d4. I mean, actually d4 is quite weak. It could be attacked by a move like bishop b6. So there's kind of an element missing in White's kingside play. So yeah, you know, I mean, it's maybe not too surprising when you compare that to that, you know, if the season 17 game, even though in principle clearly winning, was really, really difficult for both Leela and Stockfish to see how to put it away, then yeah, you can imagine that this one's maybe not so bad for black. And well, knight h4 played, king a7, knight g6, king a6. Very good idea, I think. You know, the rooks could invade either on f7 or on f8. And so, you know, don't leave the king on one of those, put the king on the 6th rank. Let's have a look. I mean, queen g2 played by Komodo, just wasn't impressed actually by the power of rook f8. I can just show you a game, again, Stockfish against Berserk, where Stockfish made something of rook f8. Takes, queen d7, queen g8, bishop b6, rook f4, and actually Berserk, I'll show you the game that it lost here. It also managed to defend it as well, and that was when it played knight d8, king g3 and king b5. And it's a very common idea actually that you could just move the bishop and move the king in here and just end up completely safe, and also, you know, ready for later sacks if pieces get exchanged over there. And after rook f8, knight c6, knight f4, bishop d4, well, you know, you already see that black's chipping away at the white center. I mean, actually, this looks like a Botvinnik system, where you know, the semi-Slav Botvinnik system, Mr. Beads will point out, where you know, black's often had a queenside pawn mass, and it's actually one of my proudest moments in theory that I sort of made up the theory that in these sort of positions where the queenside pawns are advanced, the black king should actually follow very closely behind. It shouldn't stay on the back rank and leave a gap between the pawns and the king. It should, you know, shepherd the pawns forward. And well, Vladimir Kramnik, the great semi-Slav expert at the time, he said, yeah, that's a good rule. That's a really good rule. So there we are, claim to fame. So, but yeah, here after knight d5, bishop a7, the position looks unbelievable, but somehow Berserk managed to defend this. It just wasn't quite enough for a white win. In another game, Berserk went rook b8, and well, we got this idea: knight f8, rook e8 takes, and knight b6 and rook f2. And funnily enough, this opposite coloured bishop position is just completely winning for white. It's funny really, that you think opposite coloured bishops, just a draw, but of course these pawns are on g7 and h6, and we just need to organise it that this pawn on d4 gets protected, maybe the king comes to e3, and then we'll work out how to get a rook exchange and get a bishop onto f8, and it'll just be curtains. And yeah, Stockfish won an absolutely beautiful opposite coloured bishop ending there. So, well, Komodo played queen g2, kept on shuffling, but Stockfish actually showed that actually stuff is really happening here. It's found some counterplay by going knight b5, and we're just going to take the bishop on c3 and start, well, hitting the pawns and nibbling away. So white doesn't have all the time in the world. g5 was played, takes, and knight b5, and again, it's just a big difference with the other game. There's no just waiting for white to do something. This is, okay, well, black's going for some counterplay as well. So knight takes g5, queen c6, and here already, the engines, kind of astonishingly, are already giving, like 0-0 evaluations. Berserk had a great little tussle with Stockfish here. So Stockfish against Berserk was a totally amazing game. So we just got a little bit of shuffling around first of all, lots of it actually, and then at some stage after knight h4, the engines decided that it was time to dash for glory, and we basically got this pawn coming to h6, queen e1, queen f6, rook takes c3, knight g2, white just trying to put lots of pieces in the way in order to get the h7 pawn running. Takes h7, queen d3, h8 queen, and white is just a rook up, but well, all the rest of white's position is collapsing. We've got d4 coming in, so rook f3, queen d4, we've got queen g1 checks, and yeah, the game carried on, just a completely unfathomable mess. Well, to human eyes, but to Stockfish's eyes, this was yeah, pretty clearly winning basically, and it eventually brought home the game. But again, just to show that even at this late stage, crazy things can happen. But the engines, the evaluation was starting to get closer to drawing, and takes. Yeah, we've got opposite coloured bishops. This was pretty good before, but we've only got one pawn on g7 now, and yeah, it's also black still got the queens on, of course. So rook g1, rook e8, everything's stable, and after rook g2 takes, queen b3, then we're attacking the pawn on c3 and pawns on a3, and all of the games that I played now were just ending in draws. It's not completely obvious, I mean, in a human game, getting short of time, I mean, there's weaknesses right in the position. I mean, lots of stuff that could go that could go wrong, or that could be incalculable for a human. But obviously, the engines can calculate that the counterplay that black has is going to be sufficient, and in this position, yeah, the game was adjudicated a draw. So yeah, I mean, a really interesting game, and I think, to be honest, if you take this game as a model for how to play this sort of slow French position, you really can't do wrong. I think we've seen through the engine matches that I ran what the problems are with the obvious bishop a6, exchanging off the light squared bishops, and we've just got a blueprint really with what Stockfish does for how to play these slow French block center positions, and in particular, this knight regrouping, and then just the idea of sitting and waiting and seeing what white's trying to do, and then when the moment is right, exploiting this this move a3. Black basically fossilized the queen side, and then brought the king to the queen side, and yeah, also very interesting, I found, to compare this to the season 17 Sufi game, and just see the difference that, yeah, the chances for black counterplay, can make to this sort of position, and yeah, the resilience of black's position against any of the invasions on the f-file. So there we are. I mean, I hope you enjoyed that game. If you liked it, why not give a like or subscribe to the channel, or take a look at my new book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, which is 550 pages, I think. It's a big book anyway, of engine games analysed, in this way, and also lots of tips for working with engines. And otherwise, thanks very much indeed for watching this video, and I really hope to see you for the next one. Thanks for watching.